the late 1920s, Liberia was at the center of a shocking scandal. The country was being accused of practicing forced labor, despite its founding as a safe haven for formerly enslaved African Americans. This is the story of the Fernando Po Crisis. Hello and welcome to Bar Afrique, the podcast where we tell the unexplored stories surrounding African decolonization over a drink or three. I am Talla and I'm joined by my beautiful co-host Sarah Masiyiwa, and today I will be telling the story of how Liberia was accused of selling its own citizens into slavery, despite the fact that the country was found as a safe haven for freed African American slaves.
It was really scandalous.
I'm kind of nervous about this episode.
Why?
Because it's just hard. Like, for those who know just a teeny bit about the history of Liberia, which I will get into, it's hard to sort of reconcile with the fact that formerly enslaved people could go to another place and enslave other people.
I think I know what you're saying, and I think perhaps you're being a bit political about it. Are you worried because you're calling out Black people in this podcast?
Yes, I am.
You're used to calling out Europeans.
And now
you're calling out African Americans.
Yeah, and it's a difficult history, but I think it's important. I think with this podcast where you look at everything, we look at all stories, no matter who the villain is, it's important to the history of this country and the history of the continent. So despite my hesitations and my anxieties around it, I think it is important that we get into this story. Mm-hmm. But before I dive into it, Sarah, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. During the Atlantic slave trade, between the 16th and 19th centuries.
Oh, no.
Can you tell me how many Africans were shipped across the Atlantic to the Americas?
You're about to get me canceled. Okay. How many people? Oh, no. Lynn, I don't know. How many people were shipped? How many enslaved people were shipped?
How many Africans from the continent, West Coast, were shipped to the Americas? Americas.
Is this multiple choice?
No.
Can it be multiple choice? I just don't want
to. You want me to make it multiple choice for you?
Yeah, because I don't want to answer something that is stupidly off.
Okay,
do you know what I'm saying?
I'll give you three options.
I feel like if I know the range of, because we're talking 300 years, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think I have a hard time with that's a lot of time.
It is.
Yeah. So give me three options and I'll pick one.
Okay. Option A.
Yes.
20 to 22 million.
Okay. C.
Option
I was
B.
gonna lowball this.
Well, option B.
Okay.
5 to 7 million.
Okay.
Option C. 12 to 12.5 million.
Okay. I'm gonna go middle. 12 to 12.5. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, I go with option C, 12 to 12.5 people. Million people.
See? And you are correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Between 12 and 12.5 million African men, women, and children were transported on boats to the Americas. Only 10.7 million survived that journey.
Okay.
And 380,000 of those were shipped directly to North America.
300 and what?
80,000.
That's
to North America.
Isn't that low?
A lot of them ended up going to Latin America. I mean, Brazil has a huge population of Black people.
I knew that, but I thought proportionally, because, okay, so you're saying out of
the 10.7 million
people that survived, 380,000 were in North America. Mm-hmm. So percentage-wise...
I can't do that math.
Percentage-wise, 380 multiplied by 2.5. It's low. It's low. I think I'm surprised by how low it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought there would be a more even distribution.
But no.
Okay. That's very surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very surprising.
But 12 to 12.5 million is so many people. That's a lot of people.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, it is.
And then only 10.7 of them survive the journey.
Yeah.
So this is just a little bit of a context for where we're going today. So
it's not a positive omen
it's
you've cast on this episode.
It's really not, but I think it's very important to the story we're telling today. So I will dive into it. And we are starting this story in the early 1800s, right? We are in North America right now. And there's an organization called the American Colonization Society. And it's an organization made up of like white abolitionists and slaveholders whose primary goal was to repatriate freeborn and emancipated slaves back to West Africa. And the reason that they wanted to do this is because they did not believe that freed, formerly enslaved African Americans could be equal to white people in the United States.
It's the argument that if Black people in America wanted to be free, they couldn't do it in America.
They couldn't do it here.
They had to go back to Africa.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like when wokeness goes full circle. You know what I'm saying? Like when you end up being the Black person who's like, send us back to back to where we came from.
And that's basically what the idea was, that like, they're free now. What are we going to do with all these Black people here? The best idea is to basically send them back.
Yeah, but it was coming from African Americans.
No, it was coming from white people. The American Colonization Society was founded by white abolitionists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was African Americans saying that. Okay. So it's not full circle wokeness.
No.
It's just still racism.
It's just racist.
Okay, cool.
And so what the ACS had done is that they purchased territory in Africa as sort of an asylum for formerly enslaved African Americans. But the use of the word purchase is too nice, because it was actually bought through manipulation of a man named King Peter, who had initially agreed to the sale of the territory, but then he backed out when he realized that it would affect the slave trade.
King Peter of where?
The territory that will become Liberia.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it right now in this story?
I don't remember the name. It's just the specific geographic location of where Liberia is going to be.
Okay, so it wasn't like a different country.
No, it wasn't a different country at all.
Okay.
And so they're negotiating with this man. And at first he's saying, okay. But then he realizes that it's going to affect the slave trade. And he's also economically benefiting from the slave trade. So he says, I don't want to do this anymore. But then they hold him at gunpoint and they're like, no, you're gonna sell this territory to us.
What?
Yeah.
Okay. Is King Peter like indigenous? Like, what? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
He is the king of this specific
Does
area.
he come from? Is he indigenous to this area?
Yes, to the area.
Okay.
He's indigenous to the area.
Okay.
And so they sort of force it from him.
Okay.
They forcibly buy this territory from him. And sort of like, despite the fact that there are already people living there, right? Between 1820 and 1843, about 1,119 African Americans emigrate there. And in 1847, the African Americans who are on the territory somehow negotiate their political and economic independence from the American Colonization Society. So Liberia was bought by the ACS. They were controlling the area. Thousands of African Americans arrive in the area and were like, actually, we don't really want you here anymore. So they somehow make an agreement that they were going to get economic and political independence, which is insane given the fact that there are already people there.
Okay. Were these people, these 1,000 and something African Americans?
Yes.
did they choose to go to Liberia? Or
Yes.
were they okay, so these are people who volunteered.
They volunteered to go there.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes, so they volunteered to go there. And back in the United States, with the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1862 by former President Abraham Lincoln, and for those who don't know, the Emancipation Proclamation was sort of a promise that Abraham Lincoln made after the Civil War that all enslaved people within the Confederacy, which were the southern states of the United States, would be declared free on January 1st, 1863. Right? But Abraham Lincoln, and this is something that I don't think a lot, because a lot of times in history, it's like, oh, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Oh, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. But this guy was really like, okay, they're free now, but I don't want them here.
Abraham Lincoln?
Yes.
What?
Yes. He was
Abraham
part of
Lincoln?
the group of people who was like, now.
He wanted them to go back to Africa?
Because he was one of the
I
first
didn't
people
know
to believe that like Black people and white people could not live equally. And as soon as the Emancipation Proclamation happened, he was one of the first people to be like, what are we going to do with all of these freed Black people?
Oh,
And people don't know that.
I kind of hate that you've ruined Abraham Lincoln for me.
I'm so sorry.
Like-
I just had to tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I really liked
I
that
know
tall
there's this
man.
narrative that like Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Oh, he
I
freed
didn't
the
think
slaves.
I didn't think he freed like enslaved people.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know that he was of the opinion that they shouldn't be
Yeah,
in North
he
America
did not
anymore.
believe that they could live
That's
equally as white people.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And
Crossed off.
so he was
Go
like
on.
really encouraging like African Americans to like
Go back.
go to Liberia,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So more and more ships of African Americans arrived in Monrovia, which was the capital of Liberia. And they numbered no more than like 15,000 to 20,000, despite the fact that they were trying to rule over a population of 1.5 to 2 million indigenous people who were already on that land.
King Peter's people?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
There are 15,000 African Americans trying to rule this entire land. That's almost 2 million as a population.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's this one quote that I want to say because I think it's really important to the way we should think about the story that I'm telling. And it's a quote by a man named F.E.R. Johnson. He was a Liberian attorney general, and he did a speech on the 40th anniversary of Liberian independence in 1887. And what he said was, the fathers of Liberia, like the children of Israel, had fled from the land of their captivity in order to escape the horrors of slavery and the miseries of the most grinding oppression. On you involves the duty of rendering Liberia an important factor in the civilization and Christianization of this dark continent and exercising a beneficial influence on the destiny of the race.
Okay, so in simple words.
He's basically saying it's our duty as African Americans to come and enlighten these indigenous people of the land.
That is wild. That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? And it's like, if you just look at the key words in this quote, children of Israel, so he's sort of equating.
Yeah, so they also want to be Christian. And so the people who are in what's Liberia now aren't Christian.
No, they're practicing their indigenous traditional religions.
Oh, man.
Right?
Oppression is like so interesting because I wonder if there's a theory on like if someone is oppressed and they've only ever known oppression, right? Which I'm going to say like a group of enslaved people in North America at this time would have been.
Yeah.
Like, and then they're given power and like oppression is kind of like
all they know.
Well, not all they know, but like that's their language of like what power looks like, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you're like you then become the master.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like there's this sort of duality with like the founding of Liberia, which is like one to be similar to other civilizing powers in Africa, and the other one to sort of overturn the history of imperialism and oppression and all of that.
I like being
Imperialists themselves, right? So it's an insane thing to have to grapple with now.
So what did like their oppression or like their rule of the indigenous people look like?
From the beginning of Liberia, these Americo-Liberians, which is the name that they were giving themselves, the Americo-Liberians, they had a really hard time, like, trying to establish dominance over this 2 million, like, people population, which makes sense. There are 2 million people in this territory. You guys you're 15,000, you're just arriving, and all of you just live on the coast. Like, there are millions of people within the country, right? So it's obviously going to be really difficult for you to try to rule over them through, and I'm going to speak about this a little later. So there's a lot of like forced taxation and like, they use a lot of their military to try to enforce certain things. So it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, okay, but I'm so sorry, but there's something that I'm really stuck on that like my mind is refusing to shake, which is that how did the indigenous king end up with a name like Peter? Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, I just like really stuck on this.
He was
because Peter is
King
like
Peter.
That's like a Christian
Yeah,
name.
it's like an Anglican name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that I've said it, I can now move on.
Okay. Liberia mirrored other European colonial administrations in Africa, where a small Western civilization tried to gain recognition from a much larger population of indigenous people. And they worked the same way. They behaved the same way, you know? They were brutal, they were violent, they were trying to impose some things that people didn't really want. And it's where a lot of their trouble started, right? And now we're gonna take a tiny trip to an island called Fernando Po.
Okay.
Because in 1848, the Spanish who were at this island called Fernando Po, it was an island that was described as, quote unquote, having a lazy population of liberated Africans from Sierra Leone who didn't know how to take advantage of the rich soil that was on their land, right?
Described by who?
Described by the Spanish planters.
So, okay.
Yeah, so this is like Fernando Po is part of Spanish Guinea, right?
Everyone in the story kind of sucks, right? Because so the Americo-Liberians, it's not Americo-Liberians come to Liberia.
Yeah.
And they're like, look at these black people here.
We need to
rule
civilize them and Christianize them.
And then a group of them go to the island of Fernando Po. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And then the Spanish are looking at them and they're like, look at these lazy people. We need to civilize them. So
what happens is there's already a population of Africans there from Sierra Leone who are also being called lazy. And so there are Spanish plantation owners over there, right? And they're seeing this population and are like, oh, we can't use them to actually sort of take advantage of this rich soil. So
they want to get the Americo-Liberians.
And so what happens is these Spanish planters on the island, they begin complaining, saying that they need workers, right? They need workers, and they set their sights to the mainland.
You know what this is making me think of is the fact that, like, whiteness is a concept. It is not actually the color of your skin. Which sounds like
no, I completely understand what you're saying.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because there is the idea of whiteness, if you like separate it from like skin color, is like this fundamental belief in like a hierarchy based on demographics, right? So like this idea that like black people from indigenous black people are lazy. Therefore, if you can supersede the indigenous black people and kind of take their place above them in the hierarchy, then like, and you do that because you benefit, right? So then you become more superior to them. And like, that's like the concept of whiteness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even though they are both black.
They're both, exactly. They're both black. And so these Spanish plantation owners from Fernando Po, they're looking at the mainland to get some workers, but like other colonies, especially those of British West Africa, they're like, no, we're really sort of gonna like concentrate our like scarce labor forces. We really don't want to be sending you any people. So they look to Liberia, right? And the Liberian government welcomes this attention from these Spanish planters and Fernando Po with open arms, right? Because they're already going through terrible economic crisis, and there's really, really deep ethnic and class divisions, which of course there would be. And so by 1901, 933 indigenous laborers were already working on Fernando Po, and it became common practice for Spanish planters to send agents to Liberia to recruit people from the villages in the interior of Liberia. And the Liberian government was giving permission to these Spanish planters in Fernando Po to come into Liberia and sort of like take people from these villages to work for them in Fernando Po.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, say it one more time.
So the Spanish planters in Fernando Po, they need workers. They're looking at Liberia. Liberia is welcoming this.
Where is Fernando Po?
It's an island near Spanish Guinea.
Okay,
It's a
so
bit
how
far from.
is it from Liberia?
It's a bit far.
Yeah.
I don't know the
But it's
specific.
okay. So
But it's not close. It's
Okay.
not close at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So they go to Liberia, they see these indigenous people, and they're like, oh, we could take them to work for us on this island. And the Liberian government is like, okay, you can take them. You can take them. You can take them to come work for you on this island.
Against their will?
Against their will.
Oh.
Yeah. So they make a deal with the Liberian government to
That's
be able to take these
crazy.
people to work for them on this island, right? And
They literally started their own slave trade.
exactly.
That's crazy.
And so and the reason that they do that is because their economy is shit.
Yeah.
Excuse my language. Because they're not able to sort of like build an agricultural system in Liberia. And they see that they have no other sort of economic resource or revenue that they can pull from. So they decide that the only way that they can make money is by selling the labor of indigenous people to the Spanish planters in Fernando Po.
Okay. That's wild. That's wild. Because, oh man,
I know.
I'm trying to really figure out like how I'm feeling right now. How are you feeling? And then that'll help me figure out like how I'm feeling. I want to copy your
sad.
work.
I'm sad because
Why?
it's like you come from unfathomable oppression, right? And I get that you're trying to make money, your economy's not working, but why does it have to come at the expense of these people?
Yeah.
And one of my questions for you was going to be like, how do you feel about their decision or their thinking that their only solution to be able to get their economy going is by selling the labor of these indigenous people who did not even want them there in the first place?
I feel like, is it a phrase to say that like you become the thing that you're afraid of?
Yep. I think that's a phrase.
Yeah. Because it's like being freed from, becoming freed from the slave trade and then going and starting a new slave trade is a form of basically like everyone needed therapy. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? Because like it's crazy. It's like, it's kind of like coming from a dictatorship and then someone is like, and then you criticize it and then someone's like, okay, I'm going to give you a country and then you become a dictator.
Yeah. Power is a crazy thing. Power is crazy. I think it's just like,
It's wild.
it's a wild thing. And I think it just deludes your mind.
Yeah. It's wild.
It's really wild.
Oh, I feel really, because I understand your original discomfort because I don't want to say that they were bad people.
Yeah.
But like it's giving like deep trauma. It's
Yeah.
giving deep trauma.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, you know, like even before these Spanish planters were making deals with the government, they were already going into Liberia on their own and sending agents to Liberia on their own to sort of like quote unquote recruit people, right? But then the Liberian government realized that they could do so much more with that. So not only did they make deals with Spanish planters, they ended up making deals with German companies who had plantations in Fernando Po.
They are bad people.
So they started making deals with more people, right? Making agreements that they would send thousands of indigenous Liberians to work on plantations on this island.
Okay.
But it wasn't until 1914 that the president of Liberia, whose name was D.E. Howard, signed a formal labor agreement with the Governor General of Spanish Guinea, which ruled over Fernando Po. And this agreement paid the Liberian government for each laborer that they provided to Spanish cocoa plantations on Fernando Po. And by 1927, a little bit over 7,000 indigenous people were working in Fernando Po.
Crazy.
And they were getting paid for those people working there.
Were the workers getting paid?
Very little.
Okay.
Almost nothing.
Okay.
And we will get into sort of the recruitment practices that were going on in Liberia in part 2.
Today we're drinking Tom Bollock's Burnt Orange Bourbon, honoring the pioneering bartender and author of The Ideal Bartender, the first known cocktail book published by an African American. Inspired by his use of flamed orange peel, it blends warm bourbon with caramelized citrus. Expect notes of orange, vanilla, spice, and a smooth citrus finish.
How are you feeling?
So sad. It's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good, and it's hard to say that it's not good. Because you just don't want to say bad things about other Black people, but like,
yeah, but you
come
have
on.
to.
You have to.
You have to, and yeah, and I do think that, like, from my experience, and I think we both have this experience, is like, we've both lived in the United States, and I think with African Americans, there's such a hunger in that community to like learn about this history, and to be accountable for history. I think as like from a community perspective, and we experience it even in this podcast with like the number of listeners that we do have that are in the US and African American who have never been to the African continent but are just really excited to like learn about the continent. And I don't think you should be nervous, because I think this learning about this would be very well received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think Liberia is such a unique case of an African country because of of its founding and because of what it sort of represents. But it's not a history that people learn about a lot. Even the fact that Abraham Lincoln did not want Black people in the U.S. is not I've learned that fact last year because I read a book called Black Moses about a man who was trying to build like a Black utopia in the United States. And it was just like a simple fact in the book. I was like, wait, hold on.
Black utopia in the United States?
Yeah. The book is called Black Moses. Everybody check it out.
Where is the utopia?
It doesn't exist.
No, but like, where would it have been?
Oh, God, I forgot. Oh, I forgot. I'll be back to fact check this. But it was like this man was...
Atlanta.
It actually wasn't Atlanta.
Have you been to Atlanta?
No.
Atlanta does feel like
a Black utopia?
No, well, no, but if there was a Black utopia in the United States, I feel like Atlanta would be like
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good vibe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the recruitment processes that the government was doing, right? So basically the Liberian government was using their military, the Liberian Frontier Force, the LFF, to intimidate chiefs within the country, like village chiefs within the country, to try and recruit indigenous people into forced labor. And this military was also working with small independent contractors. So not only were they working for the government, they were working for like private contractors who were working with Spanish planters in Fernando Po. But the use of the military to sort of gain favor or to use against indigenous people wasn't a new practice for the Liberian government. And it wasn't a new concept for them because they were first used to enforce tax collection from indigenous people in the late 1800s. And non-compliance was to be punished with forced labor.
So if you didn't pay your taxes,
You were
forced labor.
You were forced labor.
Can you imagine if we had that today?
The way I would pay my taxes.
Do you not pay your taxes?
I do pay my, okay. I want the Canadian government to know that I have paid all my taxes, please. I have paid all my taxes. Oh, no. I have paid my taxes. But no, it's insane. Like if you did not pay whatever taxes that they imposed on you, you were punished with forced labor. And it like predominantly affected the Kru and Gerbil people of Liberia, who would have to work for the city of Monrovia for a period between like 10 days and a month, like depending on like.
What?
Yeah, they worked for like 10 days and a month without pay.
Wait, there's a group of people in...
Yes, there's two ethnic, like predominantly ethnic groups in Liberia, the Kru and Gerbil people.
And because they can't afford to pay taxes...
If these people didn't pay taxes...
They work for free for the state.
They work for free for the state.
Okay.
Yeah. So this sort of like normalized forced labor in Liberia and sort of like as a punishment by the government. However, recruitment for forced labor to be sent to Fernando Po became really, really difficult. And because of that, the government decided that they were going to start kidnapping and raiding villages.
Okay.
Okay. Because the chiefs of these villages weren't being like cooperative in sort of sending their people to work on this island. And as a sort of cover for what the military was doing, the Liberian government pushed the idea that the exportation of indigenous laborers was a way to introduce them to a salary system and raise their standard of living.
Okay.
That was their cover. But these people weren't benefiting at all. They were getting little, sometimes no pay. It's the government that was getting paid by the government of Fernando Po and getting paid by these German companies to send all these people there, right?
Yeah.
But they were trying to like be like, oh, we're just, we're trying to show them a new way of life.
Yeah.
Bull,
yeah.
Right?
Capitalism. Okay.
Exactly. And so these people weren't benefiting at all. And sort of all the suffering that they were sort of experiencing en route to Fernando Po wasn't really worth it. Like there are a number of indigenous people who were working as laborers in Fernando Po who would come home and sort of describe this like awful stories of the ill treatments they were getting from the soldiers who were marching them to the boats and the awful treatment that they were getting by employers in Fernando Po. But the government really did not care for that because initially they didn't really know about these things, but then when they were told about them, they didn't really do much to stop it or to sort of like check it or to regulate this sort of system of exporting indigenous people for labor. And in some cases, the government even went as far as to sort of like stifle any criticism about like the forced labor that was going on. For example, there was a chief of one village who had accused certain government officials of participating in the mistreatment of the laborers, but he was arrested and then charged with spreading damaging propaganda about the Liberian government.
That's so crazy.
So at the end of the day, the government was also like really implicated in this because they didn't want any backlash.
Yeah, no, at this point they've created like a full system of just oppression. Yeah.
A complete system, but they don't want people to see that. But it's like, it's literally, we can see it in full force. Yeah. And like with the mounting accusations that were going around and the rumors that were circulating around worker abuse, the Liberian government, sometimes they would try and restrict the flow of laborers going to Fernando Po. So they would stop it and start it again when like tensions were low. Then they would start it again, stop it when tensions were high. They were just, flip-flopping a little bit.
I wonder like what the vibe is for right now when an African American travels to Liberia.
I'm very curious.
Yeah, like
too.
I want to know, like, are people mad? is there? I just want to know what the vibe is, you know?
But I also think that this is not a thing that many people know happened. And we'll get into that like at the end.
No, I know it's not a thing that many people know happened, but the Liberian people.
Yeah, they
know it
know.
happens
They
'cause
know.
it's
Like
their
generations
history.
after generation,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
know.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm, because there's a lot of African Americans now who I think have the urge
To go back.
to, you know, to the African continent and
Yeah.
to find a sense of home.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder like what the reception would be in
Mm-hmm.
Liberia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. I think I'm really curious about that as well.
Yeah.
So then, like, by the end of the 1920s,
Mm-hmm.
many Liberians who were hearing about what was going on, they were getting angry with the government. They were like, "Oh, you can't do this. Like, this is really bad."
This is
Formerly in Americo-Liberians.
These
Yes.
are Americo-Liberians.
This
At this point, have Americo-Liberians and Indigenous Liberians, I don't know if that's the way to say it, have they mixed at this point? Like when you're saying
Not
Liberians,
really.
it's just still the nation
It's
of
still-
Americo-Liberians.
Yes.
Okay.
Because again, most Americo-Liberians lived on the shores.
Okay.
And like the majority of the population of indigenous people lived within the country, right? So they were hearing all these rumors circulating around the fact that people are being sent to these islands to work for little to no pay as like they were basically like labor migrants,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so they're like, "Oh, this is messed up." They're angry with the government. The government is like hearing this, and they finally decide that they're gonna end the 1914 agreement that they had with the Governor General of Spanish Guinea. So they were like, "We're not sending any more people to you anymore."
Okay.
And this was formalized in 1927. They're like, "We're not sending any more people to you." But farmers on Fernando Po, they still wanted laborers.
Mm-hmm.
And there were still some Americo-Liberians who had connections within the government who still wanted to provide that labor because they still wanted money. So in 1928, a year after that agreement was ended, a group of farmers collaborated with a group of Americo-Liberians to continue the labor trade privately and in
Diabolical.
secret,
Okay.
right? Over 2,000 people were shipped to Fernando Po. And under this private agreement between the Spanish farmers and these Americo-Liberians, worker exploitation increased. Contracts were extended without worker consent. Many workers were not paid, and other workers contracted diseases where they weren't allowed to go to the hospital or even paid when they were ill, right? I mean, there's no oversight anymore. So these farmers could do whatever they wanted at this point, right? But within Liberia, the government is still using their military to recruit and kidnap indigenous people to work on their
Wait,
private
Lynn.
plantations.
Wait, Lynn, I thought that the 19 blah, 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 what is it called? The Spanish Guinea Agreement.
Yeah.
Meant that it stopped.
No, what it meant that they stopped sending people to Fernando Po,
But
then-
they didn't stop.
having them work within the country.
Okay.
So basically, the government was like, "Okay, well, we're not going to send them to Fernando Po anymore.
We'll just
enslave them
here.
within the country
Okay.
to work on our private plantations."
Okay.
And it was
Is this like, I don't know why I'm asking this, but like, is this like is it one leader? Like, are we talking about like one guy who's kind of doing like an unhinged thing as like the president of Liberia, and everyone's kind of
No.
like, oh, we don't really like this guy. Do you know what I'm
No.
saying? Like,
everybody was implicated.
okay.
Everybody knew what was going on. Everybody in the government was implicated.
Do you think that when the like formerly enslaved people got onto that ship to come to Liberia, that was their intention? That
I don't
they were
think
like,
so.
we are gonna go colonize.
I don't think so. Here's what I think. I genuinely believe that they thought that they were going somewhere that was going to be a safe haven for them. I believe that. I think that when they got there and they realized, oh, we'd actually have to like make sure we have an economy, make sure we have a political system,
And we don't have enough people
and
to
we don't
do
have enough
it.
people to do that. And then they tried but it didn't work. They got this proposal where they could get money by selling people to work other places. They were like, okay, this is the only thing we can do. But then it went, I don't even want to say it went too far. I think they should have sat down a little bit more and thought of other solutions before their final decision was to sell Indigenous people. And I don't think they sat down to think through these things. That's what I think.
I mean, I do think they sat down to think through it.
You think that they were like, okay, this is gonna be our solution.
Yeah, I don't think you start a slave trade by accident. I don't think don't think you stumble into it. Like,
no, I
think
agree with you.
You have to be intentional about that kind of thing.
I agree with you, but
in an environment where like this is like post-abolition.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But I don't think they also saw themselves as a place that was sort of like similar to others in the sense that like they weren't like, there was, how do I explain this? They weren't like trying to rebel or have an uprising against like a European master.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like there wasn't that, like they...
Yeah, but like this is like they basically moved into somebody else's home.
Absolutely.
And then turned the people who lived there into their servants. Like that's what it sounds like. That's
exactly what
Do you know what
the
I'm saying?
Europeans did. But they don't see themselves that way.
But like it doesn't matter if
it doesn't matter if they don't see
yourself. I'm sure. Absolutely. I'm sure like a lot of European colonizers also didn't see themselves that way.
But I think it's like they came in and were like, we're different. But they're not different. They were doing the exact same thing. If you remember the quote that I said, they talked about, he said the thing about how they saw themselves like the children of Israel. And that's a whole different conversation to talk about, like just like that phrase. They saw themselves that way. And then
within that, like you're saying that because they thought they had a right to the land.
Exactly.
They thought it was their land.
Exactly. They thought they had a right to be in that land, right? And then within that quote, he talks about Christianizing the dark continent. When you read the word dark continent, that is such a European thing that they were saying during the scramble for Africa. If you've ever read Heart of Darkness, that's literally the term that is used in that book to think about Africa.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Crazy.
It's crazy. Like, it's really crazy to think about it that way.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, so back to this and it was during this sort of time in history that these allegations of like forced labor, worker abuse were sort of like spreading around the world, right? And it was like outside forces and institutions were beginning to get involved. And the rumors about forced labor practices were only getting worse and widely known. And by the late 1920s, Liberia was like full force in the middle of a scandal. They were being accused of slavery. And media in both the US and Europe ran with this story, right? Which basically forced Liberia, with the help of the US government, to sort of go to the League of Nations, which is the precursor of the United Nations, to go to them and be like, okay, we need you to sort of investigate all these accusations.
Man, I'd be so mad if I was a Black person living in North America, right? And then you're like out here like Emancipation Proclamation, like you're like fighting for your freedom. And then you hear that this group of like a couple thousand of Americo-Liberians have gone and pulled this off.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like when you hear a story, on the news, like when there's like something really bad that's happened.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, like, you know, someone has like carried out some like horrific crime and like killed a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, they're like an African immigrant. And you're like, come on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
like,
what
feeling
are
where
you doing?
Like we're making progress.
And
Can
then
you
we
get
take
it
like
together?
15 steps back.
It's what happens when like it's a minority of people.
Yeah.
They really ruin it for like the whole group.
For all
Do you
of
know what
us.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's really frustrating.
And that's basically what was happening. And so in 1929, the United States decided that they were going to intervene based on humanitarian grounds, which is so like, okay, because you have your own humanitarian concerns to like figure out in your own country. But what they did is that they encouraged the new president of Liberia, Charles D.B. King, to go to the League of Nations and ask them to investigate the truth of these allegations, right? But the constant denial by the Liberian government that like this sort of forced labor was happening only made things worse for them. And to make things even worse, there was a man named J.B. Faulkner who had actually run for presidency against President D.B. King. This was going to be D.B. King's third presidency. And sort of Faulkner was like, a bit of a sore loser. So he decided that he was, I'm going to go spread some rumors. And all of these rumors had to do with the fact that like during President King's presidencies, all this forced labor and forced recruitment was happening. Right? So what he ended up doing is he also went to the League of Nations and pressed charges against Liberia, telling the League of Nations, you need to go ask President D.B. King what the hell they're doing
I'm not mad
in
at
the
him.
country, right?
I'm not mad at him.
Even if he was a sore loser, he was like, well, you know what? You need to go investigate them for what they're doing now.
Yeah, I love a scorned lover.
It's basically what it was.
Yep.
So then
burn the whole house down.
And so the Liberian government learned that he did that, and they were like, you know what? Okay, we're going to let the League of Nations come in and sort of investigate this. And so what the League of Nations did is that they created a commission to go and investigate what was happening in Liberia. 3 people were members. There's a man named Cuthbert Christie, who was representing the League of Nations, a professor named Charles Johnson, who was representing the United States, and ex-Liberian President Arthur Barclay, of course, representing Liberia. Dr. Christie and Professor Johnson arrived in Liberia in August 1930 to begin their investigation. But as they arrive, it's actually known that labor shipments to Fernando Po were continuing. I think I do like bourbon. It's smooth.
Yeah, it's just very strong.
Yeah, that's the problem. You have to take it in doses.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just basically told you guys that the League of Nations decided to send 3 people to Liberia to sort of investigate these allegations of forced labor that were basically like akin to slavery. But a few things that I sort of want to mention before we dive deep into this investigation. Towards the end of the 1920s, there was sort of this anti-slavery agenda that had been set by the League of Nations. And by 1930, slavery became an international issue. And what the League of Nations did is they established a series of anti-slavery agreements. And because of this, and the mounting allegations that were happening in Liberia, the U.S. not only tried to help Liberia, how do I say, get at the forefront of this stuff, but they also didn't want to be fully implicated. So that's why I think they were trying to help Liberia, because like, hey, we don't want people to think that we were sort of part of this, because there's a connection between the U.S. and Liberia, of course.
Yeah, of course.
There's that connection.
They thought Liberia, it would make them look bad.
They thought it would make them look bad.
They sent them there.
Exactly. And so they're trying to preserve their image on the world stage. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to quote unquote
and
help
also
Liberia.
At this point, it's this is 1930s.
Yeah.
So you're morally trying to argue against the Nazis. So I can understand how this would be a bad look.
Exactly, right? And also, the League of Nations had actually asked Liberia about this back in 1923. They were like, hey, we're hearing these things of you practicing forced labor and a little bit of slavery. Is there truth to this? The government said, no.
And they said, okay.
They said, okay, we believe you.
Due diligence.
Exactly. And so with this investigation, the commission was in Liberia for about 4 months. And they sort of went around the country.
And they said, are you enslaved?
Are you enslaved? Have people been practicing forced labor? So they've heard from chiefs who said yes. Mm-hmm. They heard from former laborers. And they were given a lot of testimony by these village chiefs and people who were actually being sold into this, telling them like what they witnessed, right? And the Liberian government had actually initially tried to limit the scope of the commission's like work by telling them that they could go to certain places and they couldn't go to other places. But Professor Johnson was like, you're not going to try and control this investigation. And he like really went out of his way to travel around the country and interview as many people as he could because he really wanted the full picture. And he was seeing that the Liberian government was also trying to control that narrative, right? Because they could see that they were about to look really, really, really bad. And the entire purpose of this commission and this report was to create a legal case against slavery in Liberia. The report ended up coming out in the fall of 1930, and it confirmed that there was a well-organized system of forced labor in Liberia, and that the entire operation involved some very high officials in both the government and in the military, and was led by Vice President Allen Yancey. So he was the top dog of this entire system. D.B. King, it was the type of guy who the vice president led all of that, and he sort of just let Yancey do all of that.
What you're talking about at this point is a system of organization that from the day they arrived on the shores of
Monrovia.
They were like imperialists and they were colonizing and they were brutal. So it's like to be like, and the person behind it is the vice president is a bit like, no, the person behind it is this entire group of people.
Absolutely.
Who from the day they arrived.
But I think Yancey is the one who was giving direct, and I'm not trying to like defend the D.B. King. Vice President Yancey is the one giving direct orders to this military to go and kidnap and raid those villages. And Yancey just let him do it.
Yeah. I just think I'm coming from a point where I just think there's certain things when it comes to like when your entire system is built on slavery, which like some countries still are, it becomes beyond the responsibility of a certain person. So like even when you're a citizen in a country that is building its economy from the taxation of like just basically going and harassing people into having to pay taxes, or they'll be sent into slavery. Like even a citizen is culpable for that. So
Absolutely.
Like the president is the most culpable, but everyone, like it's
everyone
not,
is culpable.
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
Like one, because it kind of makes it seem like it's like this dastardly plot of like the vice president.
The president knew, of course. It's just like I think
everyone, it's not
was implicated.
Everyone, every single person.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that society was implicated.
Yeah, but within this report, they were calling Yancey the top dog.
Yeah.
It was said that like Yancey was so like directly involved with this that like if village chiefs decided that they weren't going to cooperate with the government, that they weren't going to give their people up for forced labor, Yancey would send his military, again, to raid the villages, and the chiefs would be punished through imprisonment or flogging, just so he could get the labor that he needed to make money. Because, again, the government was making a lot of money from this. And we can't forget that. They were making money from this. This report by the League of Nations, and it exposed other types of forced labor that was existent in Liberia. Again, normalized by the government, particularly labor for the construction of roads and the building of civil compounds and military barracks. Within the country, when indigenous people were doing that, they were never paid. So it was slavery. But sort of all in all, to sort of say that the report accused Liberia of a number of high crimes. Resembling. They never actually said it's slavery, but they said it's something akin to slavery, resembling slavery, right? Just to sort of be politically correct, but it's like, you know what they were doing was slavery.
Yes. They said slave-like.
This literally what they said. They said slave-like, slave-ish. And after this report was made public, President King insisted that, that they were making efforts to sort of like abolish slavery. But it was too late. And people were angry. It was known all over the world already. So President King and Vice President Yancey ended up having to resign from their positions.
They deserved much more than their resignation.
And like I told you, like one of the commissioners was Professor Johnson, and he was actually really afraid for the lives of the indigenous people who had ended up speaking to the League of Nations for this report. And it was said that many villages were actually burnt and hundreds of people were killed in retaliation for speaking to the League of Nations for this report. And the commander of this operation, named Colonel T. Elwood Davis, who was an African American, justified their actions by claiming that the burning of the villages was a necessary measure to force obedience to the administration.
That's horrific. That's horrible.
It's insane. And when the League of Nations sort of found out that this was happening, and that the military was continuing to inflict pain on the indigenous people, they said, and they tried to force the Liberian government to accept their plan of assistance, because they'd created this entire plan where they were going to assist the Liberian government in abolishing slavery and making sure that, indigenous people felt more equal, that they had access to services, access to education, access to social service, all these things. But what ended up happening is that World War II broke out, and it took over everybody's attention.
Oh, everyone forgot.
Everyone forgot. So the question of Liberia and slavery kind of sort of went into the background.
Until now.
Because everybody was distracted.
Yeah.
So it was a thing that just, they were sweeping under the ground because they had
no
basically other bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
There was no accountability. And to this day, we don't know how many indigenous people were still being kidnapped and recruited into forced labor before World War II and after it.
Crazy.
Like when I was like working on this, there's no follow-up. There's no follow-up on the report.
Yeah.
There's no comments about anything. The most recent thing about this is the consequences of the report.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah.
There's no follow-up. So we actually don't even know how many people
really
were
hard.
in total turned into basically slaves.
Yeah, that's really hard. It's a difficult place to leave it because it feels very much like you just want justice for people.
You want it feels unfinished.
It does. It feels very much like unfinished business.
Yeah.
But I kind of knew a little bit about like I knew that Americo-Liberians had treated indigenous Liberians very
I knew that
poorly.
as well.
I didn't realize it was this bad.
It was really bad.
Yeah. But I appreciated learning about it. I think it's so fascinating, the psychology of it. And I'm sure that everyone who listened to this is going to appreciate it as well, especially our American brethren.
This is just history, guys.
It's history.
History is complicated.
It happened. We move. We'll see you guys in Dirty December in Ghana. We'll see you guys at homecoming, okay?
Yeah.
But thank you for the story, Lynn.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We'll be back with a new episode next week.
Thank you. Bye.